May 20th, 2020. We start today's episode in the middle of the UK's lockdown. The port town of Barrow-in-Furness in Cumbria was described as almost like a ghost town. The streets were empty and most people were inside and online. One of those people was 20-year-old Eleanor Williams, and she was on Facebook. After typing out a lengthy paragraph, she hit share on a post that would go viral almost as soon as it went live. "I think this is the hardest post I'm ever going to write," it began. "Yesterday I was put into the back of a car and taken to an address to have sex with 3 Asian men. Afterwards I was beaten to teach me a lesson," she continued. She went on to speak about years of abuse, rape, grooming, and torture, as well as being trafficked to different countries. She shared pictures of her injuries that looked so painful, they made you wince when you saw them. She was covered in bruises, her eyes were swollen shut, and she had rats carved into her stomach. She listed how over the years her many abusers had broken her ribs and the bones in her face, tried to cut off her breasts, put cigarettes out on her, and dislocated her arm. She said they had given her drugs to the point that she was nearly addicted to heroin, and many times just dumped her naked and left her to die. People's mouths fell open as soon as they read it and poured over all the awful pictures. One of her friends said it was something that would have been the plot to a film. Within an hour of the post going live, the police had someone in custody. But it was not one of Eleanor's abusers. It was Eleanor Williams herself. The outrage spread further afield than the small community in which she lived. No one could believe that someone could come forward so bravely to share their story and be met with an arrest. It was unfathomable. Outrage at the police soon followed, as well as the men that Eleanor had accused. Hashtags trended for her, videos in support of her went equally viral, and posters went up across Barrow. Huge protests were taking place. More than 100,000 people joined the Justice for Early Facebook page, and one online fundraising campaign raised more than £20,000. But as people marched through the streets, smashed windows, donated money, and shared everything and anything they could on social media, no one could ever have predicted what would happen next as the full and deeply unsettling truth was about to come out. Eleanor Williams first came onto the police's radar in November 2017. 16 years old at the time, she lived a quiet life by all accounts, living with her mom, stepdad, and siblings. Her parents had split when she was younger and she didn't see too much of her dad. Her family were quite well known around town, as her mom Allison was a labor counselor and described as a pillar of the community. People said Eleanor could go through periods of being quite quiet, maybe even a little subdued. Friends said she would occasionally skip school, much preferring to be out socializing and at house parties, but they said it was nothing out of the ordinary for a lot of teenagers. Just after 1 p.m. on November 22nd, 2017, Eleanor sat down for a taped interview in the police office. "Can you tell me your full name?" "My name's Eleanor Williams." She had already gone to the hospital with her mother after concerns that she had been sexually assaulted at a party, but was struggling to piece everything together. Eleanor told them that after finishing a shift early, she uploaded a picture to Snapchat after her friends saw they encouraged her to come to a local house party, but she said no. She wasn't feeling it. They said it would just be a small group, some drinks, and a good laugh. So she finally gave in and turned up. It was at her friend Cameron's house. She went on to say that she and Cameron took a shot of vodka in his bedroom and then he had tried to kiss her. She didn't want to engage and made an excuse to go to the toilet, but he got angry and dragged her back by her hair, throwing her onto the floor. She said she couldn't remember anything after that. She woke up in her own house and then started receiving messages on Snapchat from Cameron. One said, "Drugged you, ed you, mugged you, left you, laughed at you. I've got HIV." Terrified, she then went straight to hospital. 22-year-old Cameron was horrified and denied that anything had happened. He was so confused when he saw the Snapchat screenshots. He said it simply wasn't true. Couldn't be true. That was not him. He said yes, Eleanor was at his party, but she was so drunk at one point he contacted her sister to try and help and to make sure she got home okay. He was concerned about her. He was let go and Eleanor eventually said she was dropping everything against him. However, he remained on bail and the police's radar for a further 6 months after this. 2 years later, the now 19-year-old Eleanor was living in her own flat. After frequent fights with her mom and stepdad, she said she was sick of it and needed her own space. It was at this time that she would contact the police again. On May 9, 2019, with bruising across her face, Eleanor detailed how a man named Jordan Trengo attacked her with a knife, beat her and raped her 3 times. She showed messages from Jordan, some which read, "I'll rape you again and leave you for dead." Jordan was interviewed but denied it all. They had been on a night out together back in March, but he said Eleanor disappeared halfway through the night and he didn't even see her leave. He was far busier trying to talk to another girl. He said they knew of each other but not very well, and he emphatically stated that those messages had not been sent by him, and he was beyond confused. On that particular night out, he and the girl he was talking to, Ebony, were actually dropped home by police officers after they spotted Jordan arguing at a taxi rank. He and Ebony stayed at his that night. It seemed a pretty solid alibi and he was let out on bail, but a few days later, Eleanor would call the police again. She said Jordan had forced his way into her flat and attacked her, beating her with a shower head. Police thought for someone still on bail and under investigation, this was brazen on another level. They couldn't take another chance on letting him go, and Jordan Trengove was arrested and charged with 3 counts of rape. He pleaded not guilty to everything and was placed in Preston Prison's sex offender wing while awaiting trial. Word was starting to spread and everyone was staggered to hear Jordan's name tied up in something so bad. It just didn't make sense. A month later, Eleanor was reported missing. This was not the first time, far from it. Her family and friends had made calls about her well-being many times, and each time she was found by the police. It was possible, they thought, that because of everything with Jordan, she had run away, and there was a concern that she might attempt to hurt herself. She had more cuts and bruising to her body, and police suspected she was using alcohol or drugs or both. A month later, Eleanor was back at the station to make another report. She told them she had met an older man she called Rami at a house party years ago. A house party she admitted she should never have been at. Rami was Mohammed Ramzan, a married father of 4 and a local well-known and well-respected businessman, and Eleanor said she had known him since she was 12 and he had started grooming her almost immediately. She said at one particular party he had asked her to go and have sex with one of his friends, calling it a massive favor. Eleanor said she did. Detectives listened in horror, wondering what on earth was going on in their quiet seaside town. What were they scratching the surface of? Eleanor told them things had escalated and she was now being taken to various homes to meet multiple men at the same time. Some houses were even in Rochdale and Oldham, hours away from Barrow. She claimed Mohammed was the organizer of what was seeming to be a huge group of men and organized crime. She said Mohammed had tried to sell her for 25,000 euros in Amsterdam. And she also wrote down a list of names or descriptions of more than 50 girls that she said were victims as well. Investigators said they couldn't help but think of past things like the Rochdale grooming gang, which came to a head in 2012. This saw 9 men convicted of sex trafficking and rape amongst other charges. And as of January 2024, a total of 42 men have been convicted, resulting in jail sentences, totaling 432 years, and 47 girls have so far been identified as victims. They also thought of what is known as the Rotherham child exploitation scandal, which saw organized child sexual abuse happening in Rotherham in northern England between the 1980s right through until 2013, with over 1,400 victims. Both of these appalling instances highlighted years of failures of the authorities to act on reports that had been made to them. As the police listened, the parallels seemed uncanny, and it was hard to not let their mind go to the past. They wondered if they were uncovering something similar here. They arranged for new accommodation for Eleanor outside of Barrow, worried that if these men found out what she had told them, it could be life-threatening for her. Mohammed Ramzan was quickly arrested and interviewed. It took him a minute to even realize who Eleanor was. He said he barely knew her, let alone had spent any time with her. As detectives reeled off the list of crimes, places and times, he sat aghast. He couldn't believe what he was hearing and denied everything. After almost 48 hours in custody and hours of interviews, the police concluded they did not have enough to hold him, and Mohammed was released on bail. But her allegations were so serious that the local station wanted outside resources to help, and set up a major investigations team. The senior investigator said if history was anything to go off, they could not under any circumstances take a chance. Over the following months would become a regular face at the station. She was working closely with the team and would share everything with them. She revealed to the team that she had been forced to go to Blackpool on June 30th after being told she was very valuable, and this was a place they could make more money from her. Police said she gave a huge amount of detail and specifics about everything. Descriptions of the shops, the sounds she heard, the streetlights, what calendars people had on their walls, what color their hallway wallpaper was. They were elated she could remember so much, knowing this was building a really strong case for them. They asked if they could drive to Blackpool themselves and go around in an unmarked car, whilst she pointed out the locations to them. She said that she would. But as soon as they reached Blackpool, this was where all her details stopped. It was now just a long list of "don't know" and "I'm not sure." They spent 2 days driving around, but Eleanor couldn't give them anything. Other officers were going to various hotels and B&Bs in the area, sharing Eleanor's details and asking if anyone under her name had been booked in on June 30th. Finally, at the Savoy Hotel, a staff member at reception confirmed that yes, and Ellie Williams had indeed booked a room with them. She had reserved it 2 days beforehand via booking.com, and CCTV showed her checking in alone at about 8:30 p.m. An hour later, she left the hotel and more cameras picked her up in a couple of local shops. She paid for a pot noodle and some milk before heading straight back to her room. During this time frame, she had already told the police that she was being driven around and assaulted in various locations by various men. Reception could show them her keycard information, and after she got back to her room that night, her door had not been opened for almost 24 hours. She didn't leave once, and no one entered her room. She was actually logged into BBC iPlayer and watching videos on her phone. She then returned home by bus. Back in small community of Barrow, with Jordan now in jail and Muhammad under investigation for the most serious of offenses, this was really all people could talk about. Police had been going door to door talking to the girls Eleanor had named as also being victims of this alleged grooming gang. But none of them had a clue what was going on or what she was talking about. One girl said she was baffled when the police knocked on her door. She had only been on one night out with Eleanor, and it certainly had not ended with anything like that. Had gone to the same school together but were in different years, and she said she always remembered thinking there was something very strange about her behavior, but this was just bizarre. It was this, combined with the CCTV from the hotel, that gave police an awful realization. Eleanor Williams was lying. In July 2019, police had enough to place Eleanor under arrest for perverting the course of justice. But as they went to present her with what they had found, she went missing again. Her brother's girlfriend finally made a call to 999 saying she'd been driving around searching late one night when she found her stumbling alone on a bridge. Eleanor got into her car and she dropped her home, making sure she got in safely. 20 minutes later, the police turned up, still ready to arrest her. It was now 10 to 1 in the morning. When Eleanor opened the door, she was bleeding from her mouth. Her eyes were swollen and her shoulders were covered in red marks. This was not at all what they were expecting, given what her brother's girlfriend had just said. But they took her straight to hospital. In a word, she named another person, someone called Oliver. She told a story of being forced to go and meet him in Preston, where he had made her take drugs and raped her. She said he was part of a sex trafficking ring in Ibiza and said she had his number for them to track him down. She was clearly intoxicated and admitted to drinking alcohol and smoking spice. Spice is a synthetic drug which originally came onto the recreational drugs market to mimic the effects of cannabis. But spice is dangerous due to its potency and the way it exerts effects on the brain and body. It is often referred to as the zombie drug and can cause seizures, extreme anxiety, and even psychosis. They found her on CCTV getting off the train at Preston, just as she had said. When they found the man she had accused, they were also able to locate him on the cameras. Ollie was a trainee electrician and had been celebrating a birthday in town when he bumped into Eleanor randomly. He had in fact stopped her to get a lighter from her. They chatted for about 20 minutes and walked into an alleyway, where he admitted to kissing her and embarrassingly recalled a brief and perhaps clumsy sexual encounter. Just over a minute later, Elena could be seen walking back out of the alley, lighting a cigarette and walking off. She then went into some public toilets and stood in front of the mirror, rubbing her eyes for ages. She got onto her train and headed back to Barrow. This was just an hour or so before the police turned up at her door. She had no injuries to her face at that time that they could see. And although CCTV can only ever show a small amount, something about what she was saying happened just did not seem to be reflected in the footage before them. Ollie even sent her a message asking her to add him on Snapchat, hoping to see her again. He told police he thought she was gorgeous and he was happy that he had met her. She told him she was from Wigan and was going to work in one of the nightclubs in Preston. Neither of which were true. He said, "I was just calling her to see because I was happy I met her and I was ringing her to arrange to meet her. That's why I called her, because I wanted to see her." The police said from their examination it seemed to be a totally random encounter and he appeared to genuinely quite like her. When she got off the train at Barrow, the story she told the police was that she was then met by 2 older Asian men who walked her back to her flat where she was brutally raped and attacked again. But the cameras showed her walking alone for a good while before her brother's girlfriend, just as she had said, saw her on the bridge. His girlfriend confirmed that there was no one with her at the time she picked her up and she had no injuries to her face or body. She dropped her home and then called the police right away to let them know she was back. And just 20 minutes later, her face was now bleeding and she was covered in marks. As well as what her brother's girlfriend had told them, her neighbors hadn't seen or heard anything either, and detectives said there was no other conclusion they could draw other than she had done this to herself. But this was such a hard thing to even imagine someone doing to themselves. Everything was moving so quickly and more names were being thrown out. She accused another man named Lee of rape and told people she had a baby boy called Bailey, and even said she spent several weeks in hospital in a coma after being given a backstreet abortion using knitting needles. She had never given birth nor been in a coma in hospital, and all of this could be confirmed by her medical records. Eleanor Williams was finally arrested and charged with perverting the course of justice, and police presented her with CCTV from the Savoy Hotel. She changed her story and said the men in the gang had found out she was informing them, and knowing her life was in danger, she had to hide out in hotels. But when officers pointed out they could just check her flight records to corroborate her story about being trafficked in Ibiza, she admitted that wasn't true. When she claimed Muhammad had trafficked her to Amsterdam to sell her at an auction, she had in fact been in Amsterdam, but with her sister and her sister's boyfriend, sharing a room with them as well. Bank records could put Muhammad in A, B, and Q in England on the very day she was talking about. With her partial admissions now starting to come out, the court agreed to release Jordan Trinjo, who was still awaiting trial for the 3 counts of rape he was refuting. He was released after being in the sex offenders wing for 10 weeks. He later said prison was disgusting. To be there when you know you haven't done anything wrong is 100 times worse. I was in there with serious criminals. I was put in the sexual offenses population. As you can imagine, it's not a nice place to be. Within a few months, he had to move away from Barrow. I thought it would end the first day we moved in, and I had someone shout rapist at me. It was clear then that no matter where I went, someone would always know. I was barred from everywhere. Eleanor was let out on bail and went back to her mom's. She was given a strict curfew, and almost a year would pass while the police continued to compile their case. We now find ourselves back where we started today's episode, in May 2020. On the 19th of May, Eleanor's family reported her missing again. She had now been reported missing more than 30 times in just 1 year. Officers finally found her late one evening, standing in a field dressed in all black with her hood up, carrying a rucksack. She was talking very fast and was agitated. As they got closer, they could see she was covered in blood, with black eyes, and the tip of one of her fingers was almost cut off. As she sat in the back of the police car, she said she had been dragged into a car and taken to a house where she was beaten and raped by 10 Asian men. These were the most extreme injuries they had seen so far, and she was taken to hospital. As soon as the sun rose, police were back in the field. They found her in looking for any more clues. They quickly found a hammer covered in blood, which they took in for testing. Her injuries were so brutal they were hard to look at, and some pictures we have not even included. But these would be the pictures she would upload to Facebook a day later. Pictures which would go viral and start to unravel the chain of events we find ourselves in. Detectives said they were watching someone take things to such a point she could have ended up taking her own life. She was clearly extremely troubled. She was drinking a lot, taking drugs like spice and cocaine, running away, and allegedly making attempts to end her own life. She had broken her bail conditions. They were able to rearrest her. Little did they realize that while she sat in custody, her Facebook post was spreading like wildfire. Detectives seized a further 8 hammers from her flat and multiple phones. Experts spent time trawling through the vast amounts of accounts and messages. She would largely use Snapchat to talk to people, and with the cooperation of the social media giant, they got access to her Snapchat data. Professor Lee Grant, an expert in forensic linguistics, examined the messages between her and her alleged attackers, and he said he found a significant similarity between the words and phrases in all the disputed messages. He concluded that she had written them all herself. Between October and December 2019, she was chatting to someone she knew from school called Harry Cooper. They had been flirting over messages, and when the messages became more sexual, she changed his contact information to Exaram, someone she told the police was a trafficker attempting to groom her. She later changed his info again to X-Rami, so when Harry called her she could show it to the police and say it was Muhammad making the calls. She wrote herself letters pretending to be Muhammad as well, acting as if he were writing to her to apologize for the things he had done. Snapchat data could also confirm that Jordan Trinjo's alleged Snapchat account, Trench7, was created by Eleanor. Another phone which was registered to Elena's address was used to create an account under the name Rollo Kelsey, someone she completely made up and also claimed was a trafficker. Another account under the name Salza was also created by her. In early July of 2019, she used another mobile phone which had been given to her by a Barrow charity which supports female victims of violence and sexual abuse called Women's Community Matters. She used this phone to send messages purporting to be another victim caught up in the trafficking ring, someone called Nicole. Every single allegation she had made, police could pick apart, either using phone data or CCTV. Testing on the hammer also came back, and was only one person's DNA on there, Eleanor Williams. A pathologist concluded that her injuries were consistent with self-inflicted blows using her right hand. They were also able to find CCTV footage which showed her purchasing the hammer that was found in the field, and which also confirmed she had been on her own the whole time. A 10-week trial would begin in October 2022, and it was complex to say the least. Dr. Lucy Bacon, a forensic psychiatrist who assessed Eleanor many times, diagnosed complex post-traumatic stress disorder resulting from childhood trauma. She said she displayed all of the key symptoms, including suicidal ideation and substance misuse. She said she suspected undisclosed sexual abuse in childhood and social services being involved in the home until she was 8, although the ins and outs of this are not known. Dr. Martin Locke was on behalf of the prosecution, and he said he was not able to diagnose Eleanor with any psychiatric disorder. But Dr. Lucy Bacon suggested this may have been because he was male and that Eleanor had refused to engage with some male healthcare professionals in prison. A big part of the prosecution's evidence was the hammer and the self-inflicted wounds. But in court, Eleanor denied hitting herself with anything, saying, "I'm not a psychopath." The jury took just 3.5 hours to find her guilty of 8 counts of perverting the course of justice, and unusually for the UK, her sentencing was televised. 22-year-old Eleanor Williams was eventually jailed for 8.5 years and is first eligible for parole in 2027. A petition to extend her sentence was rejected, as was Eleanor's appeal against her own sentence. Through an apology letter to the judge, Eleanor partially admitted her lies, saying she had done wrong on some of this and added that she wasn't thinking straight when she made the Facebook post. Allison, Eleanor's mom, said, "The order says Ellie was a victim of exploitation and trafficking from the age of 12. Personally, I don't believe that because I think as her mother I would have known something was happening to her at such a young age, but to us, her family, it says she was telling the truth, that she was a victim in the way that she claimed to be, and as her mother I believe her. There were some things she claimed that I do believe were not true. There were parts of it that she made up. I also don't believe that Ellie inflicted those injuries on herself. She couldn't have caused them. There is so much people still don't know about Ellie and what she has been through. They would think differently if they knew." The more than £20,000 that was raised via online funding was intended to be used to pay for a private prosecution of her alleged attackers. After outraging questions about where the money had gone, Allison said that £13,000 had been donated to 2 homeless charities. But Shane Yarrell, who organized the appeal, said he had launched legal action to recover the money, with just over £7,000 having been returned to him by his bank following an anti-fraud claim. He transferred $3,600 to the Barrow-based Furness Multicultural Community Forum and gave the same amount to the James Bulger Memorial Trust. Ellison was also suspended by the Labour Party. There were also calls for stricter rules to be put in place when it came to social media. Some of her posts were viewed over 100,000 times, which made it very hard for the police to put a stop to things and also dissect the truth from the lies. However, we all know that the internet moves at a rapid speed, and in the space of a few minutes, something can be on the way to going viral. Once it's out there, and it's very hard to put the jack back in the box, so to speak. The Online Safety Act 2023 was created to regulate online speech and media and referenced Eleanor's case. It gives the relevant Secretary of State the power to designate and suppress or record a wide range of speech and media that is deemed harmful. Cumbria police said they had to deal with more than 150 crimes in the aftermath of Eleanor's Facebook post, 83 of which were classed as hate crimes. Doug Marshall was the senior investigating officer on the case, and he described this as a disgusting state of affairs. There is still so much speculation about what possibly possessed her to do something like this. Everything from wanting to copy films or TV shit seen like Taken or the BBC drama Three Girls, which was actually based off real-life events, to the effects of drugs and alcohol, to just thriving off of having the police hang on her every word. One of the investigators said she just had a desire to be believed. She desperately wanted to be believed. It is easy to see why a post like that blew up in the way that it did. Seeing those photos coupled with that caption would undoubtedly upset and shock anyone who saw it. People put themselves in her shoes, looked at her as if she was their daughter, their friend, their sister, and it struck such a nerve in the community, and eventually the whole of the UK. It is impossible for most people to even contemplate thinking of fabricating something like that, let alone saying these lies out loud and watching them play out in such a frightening way. The police spent years looking into these claims and trying to catch the people responsible for what they believed was organized crime on a huge scale. They weren't just fighting for Eleanor, they were fighting for the 60 girls she claimed were being affected by it too. This took up an unbelievable amount of man-hours and thus took time away from other people that needed real help and real-life-altering situations that needed to be looked into. And the men that found themselves accused of some of the most appalling things you could ever be accused of, what they went through is unimaginable and will stay with them forever. Mohammed lived in fear, walking around streets where everyone's heads would turn and stare. He said, "Absolutely ruined me, to the point where I smashed a bottle on my head. I wanted to kill myself because of the damage it did. The reputation I'd made was ruined." Jordan was much the same and said, "I tried killing myself over it. I got diagnosed with complex PTSD because of it all." He became a father in August 2021, but says he struggled to bond with his son as her trial kept getting postponed. Ali stopped working and studying after the accusations and spent a lot of time seeking treatment for mental health issues. And Cameron said the abuse he got online was so bad, he was scared to pick his son up from nursery because of what might happen to him. Even men that had not been named by Ellen have found themselves watching over their shoulder as they walk down the street, and still feel the aftermath today. Sajid lived in Barrow most of his life, and he said the impact on the Asian community there was unlike anything he could have ever imagined. After the Facebook post went viral, Sajid's trade dropped by 95% almost overnight. Another local man named Adil also ran a takeout and lost tens of thousands of pounds in revenue. He had to take out a loan and borrow money from family and friends just to get by. He said people just looked at him differently. Even customers that came back looked at him differently. The impact of this on people that had suffered abuse was also massive. One of Eleanor's friends who had suffered years of abuse herself said reading Eleanor's post gave her the courage to tell her own story, and the betrayal she felt when the truth came out broke her heart. She said it was like a domino effect. Everyone was coming forward to tell their story, to make her feel like she wasn't alone. The last thing we wanted to do was not believe her because we know what it's like to not be believed. Maggie Oliver used to be a detective and played a pivotal role in the Rochdale grooming gang case. She was so appalled at how the Rochdale case had been handled that she eventually resigned from Greater Manchester Police and became a whistleblower to expose the poor handling of the case by her own team. She now runs a foundation for abuse survivors and said that this case had left her feeling saddened. When Eleanor first made her allegations, Maggie had supported her family and referred them to the Center for Women's Justice. She said, "About all the victims and survivors throughout the country who are now feeling uncomfortable and wondering are they going to be believed or will they come forward." One detective who worked on his case reiterated this and said the thought of what happened in this isolated incident putting real victims off coming forward was very upsetting, and he hoped this would not be the case. Adil said, "We were branded guilty before any real evidence had come out. We were tried and found guilty by social media. And one question that will always remain in this case is why?" On December 1st, 2014, 47-year-old Abolia Ryan, a mother of 3, had been looking forward to spending the upcoming holiday season with her children. Sadly, someone ended her plans, and she never got to enjoy her favorite time of year with her loved ones. 3 days after her murder, on December 4th, 2014, the Abu Dhabi Police Department put an end to their tireless efforts of investigating the merciless homicide when they made an arrest in the city. What came to light after the arrest forced the authorities to be on high alert once again as an unforeseeable motive was uncovered, and it became more and more evident that this case wasn't as simple as it seemed. Who was this woman that Abu Dhabi police had taken into custody? What could she have done that put the investigators in a race against time? The woman who was arrested was 38-year-old Ala Badr Abdullah al-Hashemi. She was a Yemeni-born woman living in the United Arab Emirates with her husband Mohammed al-Habashi al-Hashemi and their 6 children. Ala's eldest child was 10 years old, while her youngest was merely 10 months old when she decided to commit an awful deed. All her kids, young and innocent, were unaware of the wicked schemes that went on inside their mother's head. On Monday, December 1st, 2014, Ala set out to bring her plans into action. She put her black gloves on and covered her face with a veiled niqabi, a usually black garment worn by Muslim women to cover their face as part of an interpretation of hijab. Leaving her house just a little before 1 p.m. that same day, headed to the famous boutique mall, which was located on Al Reem Island in Abu Dhabi. Despite knowing that the mall was equipped with fully functioning CCTV cameras and that she was being watched by the security, Ala was completely unbothered. She wouldn't turn back or leave the mall without doing what she had to do. Entered the mall around 1:13 p.m. and took the elevator. Upon exiting the elevator, Ala spoke briefly to a security guard and then headed towards the mall's washroom, where she encountered a 47-year-old woman named Abolia Ryan. Ala waited for a while, and when Ibolia was alone, Allah struck with full force and stabbed her to death. Moments later, after exiting the washroom, Allah rushed to the lobby once again and hurriedly got into the elevator. It didn't take long for the crowd in the mall to notice what had happened inside the washroom, and as they emerged in the lobby in a state of panic, still processing the gruesome murder that had just taken place, Allah escaped the building. And even though the security at Boutique Mall was usually tight, Allah managed to slip through the hands of the guards. Luckily, all her movements had been captured by the security footage. The mall security informed the Abu Dhabi Police Department of the tragic incident, and as the detectives arrived at the scene, an investigation was launched into the murder. Ibolia Ryan was a Hungarian-American kindergarten teacher who was originally born and brought up in Romania. In 2006, she and her husband Paul Ryan relocated to Sopron, Hungary, along with their daughter Timea and twin sons Adam and Aiden, before subsequently undergoing a divorce. After she had separated from her husband, Ibolia went wherever her work took her. Over the course of the next few years, Ibolia had a diverse teaching career which spanned 4 countries, including the United States, and with Abu Dhabi being her last stop. She had been residing in Abu Dhabi for almost a year, and apart from being a teacher there, she also fulfilled the duties of being a devoted mother to her 11-year-old twin sons who lived with her in their Abu Dhabi home. At the time, Ibolia's 13-year-old daughter Timea was living with her father, Paul, Ibolia's ex-husband, in Vienna, Austria. Ibolia had devoted herself to the realm of education in the United Arab Emirates, and even though she was in a strange land away from home, she settled in quite well. Beyond the conventional scope of her teaching responsibilities, she also undertook the role of mentoring fellow teachers, contributing significantly to the professional growth of her peers. It was also evident through her actions that her main focus was to lead her students toward a better future, and she was widely recognized for her resolute dedication to her profession. Ibolia embodied a sense of purity in this world, serving as a beacon of kindness and compassion. She lived with a profound sense of purpose, consistently striving to create a positive impact and contribute to the betterment of the lives she touched. On December 1st, 2014, as the holiday season was approaching, Ibolia had planned to go shopping at the boutique mall and then head home to her twins. But little did she know that fate had different plans for her. During the initial stages of the investigation, authorities faced considerable difficulty in ascertaining the identity of the suspect, who remained completely concealed from head to toe. This also led them to consider the possibility that the perpetrator might be a male masquerading in disguise. A couple of days after the tragic murder of Ibolia, specifically on December 3rd, 2014, Abu Dhabi police issued a public statement indicating that efforts were still underway to determine the identity and gender of the suspect. And although there were many people who saw the killer, none of them could provide any distinctive details such as facial features or build about the suspect, because of the fully enveloping attire consisting of a BIA, black gloves, and a face cover. The Abu Dhabi Security Media Department further shared more information by uploading a video on its official YouTube channel. This footage, featuring CCTV recordings, portrayed the killer labeled as the Reem Island Ghost. The video showcased the reactions of the people present at the scene during the heinous act. Notably, a mother accompanied by a young child was observed hastily ushering the child away, while security personnel approached the corridor in response to the unfolding events. The footage showed heightened awareness around onlookers, with particular attention drawn to activities in the restroom area. The surveillance footage, serving as a critical piece of evidence, also captured the cloaked suspect subsequently picking up a newspaper, probably to conceal the weapon, and then proceeding in the direction of the restroom. Approximately 90 minutes later, the individual suspected of the assault hastily re-emerged into the lobby, prompting disarray among shoppers who swiftly dispersed. In the midst of the chaotic scene, the alleged attacker dismissed the efforts of a woman attempting to interfere with her. As a security guard made his way towards the restrooms, the suspect rushed into the elevator and ultimately fled the scene after the crime occurred. The tape concluded by revealing a distressing visual. A trail of bloody footprints originating from one of the restroom stalls gave a glimpse of the violent and gruesome nature of the crime. Law enforcement officials reported that the unfortunate victim, Ibolia, met a tragic end through fatal stabbing. Detectives also discovered a kitchen knife at the crime scene and confirmed that it was the murder weapon. Questioning the witnesses, the detectives learned that prior to the murder, the two women had also gotten into a heated argument. But it wasn't clear to any of the detectives whether the attack on Ibolia was planned, or was it just the result of an overly heated argument. The surveillance footage, as well as the official police reports, provided a detailed account of the suspect. Following the commission of the initial crime, The Nikobe suspect was seen returning to her vehicle and eventually exiting the scene. Shockingly, detectives learned that the suspect had then proceeded to a residential building situated in the Abu Dhabi Corniche, where once again, an unsettling sequence of events unfolded. The security cameras at this location captured the suspect's movement and showed her walking into the building holding a small black suitcase. She proceeded toward the apartment of a 46-year-old Egyptian-American doctor who was only identified as MH. The doctor lived there with his wife and 3 kids. She left the suitcase near their residence and exited the building. Compellingly, the police video revealed more details about the suspect. In the video, detectives were able to see the presence of blood on the suspect's steering wheel and the black suitcase, identical to the one she allegedly carried to the doctor's apartment. This chilling visual evidence added another layer of complexity to the unfolding narrative, highlighting the gravity of the suspect's actions as she went from one crime scene to the next. Fortunately, the doctor's son spotted the suitcase in the evening while going to the mosque to pray. He saw something strange in front of the house and told his family. They called a security guard for help and he contacted the police. The police were able to confirm that it was a bomb and defuse it just in time before it could explode. The security guard mentioned that a woman with gloves had come to the house just minutes before the incident. She was dragging a black suitcase. He added that she went to the floor where the doctor's family lived and a few minutes later quickly left the building. According to detectives, the homemade bomb was made using basic materials which were easily available in the market. The bomb was made up of a small gas cylinder, a lighter, glue and nails meant to cause severe injuries when the bomb went off. While the detectives kept the investigation going to identify the killer, they kept their progress and measures under wraps, not sharing many details about the case. On the morning of Thursday, December 4, 2014, Abu Dhabi police caught the person responsible for the crime. The killer was identified as 38-year-old Ala Badir Abdullah al-Hashemi. General Sheikh Sef bin Zayed Al Nahyan, who was Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Interior in the UAE, shared that the security and police forces had arrested the suspected woman known as Nikobe for brutally killing the American teacher Iblia Ryan. He highlighted that they identified the suspect in less than 24 hours and arrested her in less than 48 hours. However, the detectives refused to disclose how they successfully identified Ala. Going through Ala's internet search history, it was evident that Ala had become extreme in her beliefs because of the things she saw on the internet and the people she followed. She didn't have a specific plan to hurt a particular American person, but she wanted to hurt someone from another country at random. Ala was quite blunt when she stated the reason behind the attacks and didn't try to hide any details. Ala admitted that she chose Ibolia and the doctor simply because they were American. Furthermore, Ala told the detectives in charge of the case that she committed those horrible acts because her husband, Mohammed al-Habashi al-Hashemi, was taken by the police for questioning on the suspicion that he might be connected to terrorist groups. She wanted to get back at the police force for taking her husband and make foreigners, especially Americans, British and French people living in the country, scared for their safety. These terrible incidents happened after there were other attacks on people from Western countries in Saudi Arabia. Many people around the world heard about these attacks and it made the international security and business communities worried. Additionally, just a few weeks from Abala's stabbing, there had been warnings from U.S. embassies in the area because some websites were encouraging attacks specifically on American teachers. Abu Dhabi was mostly considered a safe place for people from other countries to work and the security there was very strict when it came to terrorism. However, in light of these events, people from other countries living in Abu Dhabi began to grow fearful regarding the increasing crime rate against international citizens. The government in the Emirates said that Abala's killing was a terrorist attack done by one person who had been influenced by online terrorist beliefs. The police clarified that Ala didn't know either of her victims. She carried out those attacks only because of the nationality of the victims and not because of any personal problems. This made the people who live in Abu Dhabi, both citizens and those from other countries, feel uneasy because terrorist attacks almost never happen in the United Arab Emirates. Detectives uncovered another threatening detail about Abolia's murder when they came across a statement made in September 2014 by Abu Muhammad al-Adhani, who spoke for the group calling itself the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. In the statement, Abu Muhammad al-Adhani urged the Muslim community to harm Westerners and people from any other country involved in the attacks on their group. His exact words were, "Hurt them in any way you can." The attacks that followed this threatening statement were seen as part of a pattern of violent acts inspired by ideas instead of a direct order from militant groups. Other examples included the 2014 ramming attack in St. John's, sur Richelieu, the beheading of a French tourist named Hervé Gordel in Algeria, and other attacks on people from Denmark and the United States and Saudi Arabia. Events of terrorism were not taken lightly by the officials in Abu Dhabi. A good chunk of the city's functioning relied on the work of many people from other countries and on tourism to keep its economy going. To make sure that the violence remained isolated, security authorities sent out a strong message to any other potential terrorists in the UAE, warning them of the dangerous outcomes of any attacks they might be planning. A security official in the UAE, who wasn't named, shared with an Emirates news agency called WAM that just before the attack, Allah had been surfing through terrorist websites on the internet, and it was through these websites that she learned how to make explosives and carry out a murder. The detectives were also keen on exploring the possibility that Allah was not working alone. The police talked to ABC News and said they arrested some other people at Allah's house, but they weren't certain whether these people were involved in the attack or not. Allah told the investigators that her husband, Mohammed al-Habashi al-Hashemi, used to support militant groups. He made her watch and listen to recordings of leaders from groups like Osama bin Laden. Her house was said to be like a base of operations, but it wasn't clear if she was part of any groups. Upon further investigation, it was discovered that Allah was also found guilty of using an online account to share information that mocked and harmed the country. As the news channels covered the report of Allah's arrest, it was revealed that she was also convicted of sending money to Al-Qaeda, a terrorist organization in Yemen, knowing that it would be used to support terrorist activities. On June 29, 2015, before announcing the verdict, Judge Fala al-Hajari said that the UAE, with Allah's blessings, had been and always will continue to be a safe and stable place. It's an example of people living together in peace and harmony. He mentioned that in recent years, some new criminal methods not seen before in the UAE have been used to scare and hurt people. The goal was to disrupt the country's system and put society in danger by doing harmful things. When there was a threat to the overall stability of the nation, it was important to review and deal with these actions in the strictest way possible. That's why the new anti-terror law was achieved to fight against terrorism and get rid of it. The judge ordered the law enforcement to confiscate all the evidence in Allah's case and to shut down the online account Allah had been using to communicate with terrorist organizations. Later, on June 29, 2015, the Federal Supreme Court in Abu Dhabi sentenced 38-year-old Emirati woman Ala Badir al-Hashemi to death for committing the murder of 47-year-old Ibn Yulia Ryan. Since the ruling was made by the Supreme Court, it could not be appealed. Hence, Ala's fate had been decided. During her trial, Ala requested the court to provide her with psychological help. She said that she had been having strange visions and saw ghost-like people. The court took this into consideration and called for psychiatric tests to be done on Ala. However, the results showed that Ala was well aware of what she did, and her mental state didn't seem to affect her actions when she carried them out. When the court declared the verdict and sentenced Ala surrounded by 4 police officers didn't show any emotion. After leaving the court, she smiled and waved at her father and brother. On July 13, 2015, a Monday morning, Ahmed al-Dahani, Attorney General for the State Security Prosecution, announced that the ruling of the State Security Circuit of the Federal Supreme Court No. 73 of 2015 on the execution of Ala Badr Abdullah had been carried out following the approval of President Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan. However, the officials didn't disclose how Ala was executed. Members of the expatriate community in Dubai held a candlelight vigil in memory of Ibn al-Ras and shared how her tragic death had impacted them. The process of closure for Abolia's family, friends, and the teaching community was difficult. Paul Ryan, Abolia's former husband with whom she had 3 children, shared his views on the verdict as well. A recruitment firm that helped bring Paul Ryan to Abu Dhabi started a fundraising campaign so he could take her body back home and support their children's education. After a few weeks, the Ryan family took over the fund and utilized it to help Ryan's family in Romania. General Sheikh Sef talked about Abuya's murder as something that went against the important values the UAE believed in. These values came from the teachings of Islam and the true Arab heritage. He mentioned that the UAE strongly supported these good values, whether it was within the country or in other places. He also shared how sad he felt to see such crimes happening in a country known for its safety and security. Later in 2015, Ala's husband, Mohammed al-Habashi al-Hashemi, faced serious charges for supposedly planning to bomb tourist places and harm a local leader in December of that same year. The name of the leader Mohammed had planned to assassinate wasn't revealed. During a court hearing at the Federal Supreme Court, Mohammed persisted that he was innocent and said he didn't do any of the things he was accused of. Mohammed was being represented by 2 lawyers. One was chosen by the government and the other was chosen by his family. Both lawyers dodged reporters when asked to make a comment on Mohammed's situation. Muhammad was accused of 7 things, including planning to bomb the Yas Marina Formula One racetrack and a nearby IKEA in the capital. He also supposedly planned to attack tourists and an American military base. Police also found evidence linking Muhammad to terrorist organizations Al-Qaeda and ISIS. His case was adjourned until January 18, 2016, but since it didn't receive enough media coverage, the public couldn't find out how the court proceedings went and what the verdict was. California is a state that needs little introduction. With a population of almost 40 million people, many travel from far and wide to visit the Golden State. Home to glitz and glamour, golden beaches and gorgeous scenery, Silicon Valley and the Hollywood elite. But like most places, California is definitely not without a darker side. Today, we are looking at a series of appalling crimes spanning across 15 years, and only reaching a conclusion in 2021. This is the story of the Hollywood Ripper. This story covers almost 2 decades and actually begins in 1993. But sometimes you first must go forwards in order to work backwards. We'll begin today's episode in 2001 in Los Angeles, California. One person that called this place home was 22-year-old Ashley Ellerin, an up-and-coming fashion student. Finding her way in the hustle and bustle of LA, she was feisty and fearless, and everybody said she was career-focused and determined to be a success. After gaining a place at the Los Angeles Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising, she started taking extra classes at UCLA and got a part-time job as a dancer out in Vegas. Ashley was working long hours every single day, carving out her own path in the busy city. She was sharing a bungalow with some friends on a nice little street in an idyllic location, just a short walk away from the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Given her job and the social circle she was running in because of her fashion work, Ashley soon started catching the eye of big Hollywood stars. She briefly dated Vin Diesel and was also romantically linked to Law and Order's Jeremy Sisto, who even flew Ashley over to one of his film sets. In December 2000, she started talking to an actor whose star was rapidly rising in Hollywood. 23-year-old Ashton Kutcher, currently starring in the hit TV program That 70s Show and having just wrapped on the movie Dude, Where's My Car? He and Ashley had met through mutual friends and hit it off right away. February 21, 2001 was the night of the Grammys and Ashley was going to an after party at a friend's house. Ashley and Ashton spoke on the phone and the pair made plans to hang out after the party. Ashton said he would meet her at her bungalow and they could go for dinner and drinks. Ashley spent her day catching up with her dad who was visiting from out of town. After this, Ashley's landlord, Mark, came over to see her. It would later come out that the pair had been seeing each other on and off for a while and slept together that evening. At around 8:30 p.m., Ashton called Ashley to confirm their plans. He told her he was running behind and maybe they should just grab some drinks and pass on dinner. She said that was fine as she was just out of the shower anyway and would slowly start getting ready. At around 10:15 p.m., Ashton called Ashley again but her phone rang out. He headed over to her bungalow anyway. The lights were on and her car was parked outside. After knocking on the door several times and getting no answer, he peered through a gap in a side window. It looked messy inside, but Ashley had told him she was in the middle of remodeling, so the mess didn't seem too out of place. He could see some red on the floor and assumed it was a glass of wine that she had spilled. As he was later than he initially told her he would be, he thought that she was simply mad at him and had either gone out or gone to bed. With this, he left. The next morning, Ashley's roommate walked into a frightening scene. Ashley was on the floor outside her bedroom in a pool of blood. She had been stabbed 47 times, with some of the wounds being almost 6 inches deep and her head was almost severed. Her body was already turning blue and it was clear that she had been dead for hours. The relatively quiet community was completely stunned. Ashley's death was shocking and on everybody's minds. Her family and friends gave police all the contacts and information they could. But for somebody who was as busy and popular as Ashley, detectives had a lot of names to get through. The only neighbor that could offer them anything said they thought they heard something that sounded like shouting just after 8:30 p.m., but they put it down to a party or a gathering. They hadn't seen anyone coming or going, and apart from the noise, there was nothing else that seemed noteworthy. The police started with the man she was supposed to be seeing that night, Ashton Kutcher. He told them that he was worried, as although he had nothing to do with her death, his fingerprints were on her door handle. They asked him some routine questions and he was very quickly ruled out. He was shaken and upset about what he now realized he'd seen inside, but he simply couldn't help the police any further. Another person they wanted to talk to was Ashley's landlord, given their relationship, but he was also eliminated from the investigation. The bungalow was very secure and double-gated, and as there was no sign of a forced entry, it meant that she had opened the door to her killer, which implied she potentially knew them. One of the names her friends handed over to the officers was Mike the Furnace Man. They didn't know a lot about it, just that he was someone Ashley had complained about pestering her for a while, with some of her friends saying he was creepy, always hanging around and turning up uninvited. After several months, the Los Angeles Police Department finally landed on a name, Michael Gargiulo. As detectives started trying to locate Michael to ask him some questions about his whereabouts that night and his connection to Ashley, they received a surprising call from the Cook County Sheriff's Office in Illinois. They had recently opened up a cold case from 1993 and were looking for someone currently living in Los Angeles that might be able to help them. None other than Michael Gargiulo. The LAPD could not believe what they were hearing and knew this was no coincidence. The Illinois case that was currently being investigated was the 1993 murder of Tricia Picacho, an 18-year-old who had been stabbed nearly 50 times on the steps of her family home. On the night of Friday, August 13th, Tricia met up with some friends for dinner at a TGI's. It was one of their last nights together before they all went their separate ways to various universities. That night, she and her friends stayed together until about 1 a.m. and after dropping her friends home, Tricia drove home herself. Just a few hours later, Tricia's father, Rick, found his daughter dead on the front steps of their home as he left to walk the dog. He said the first thing he saw when he stepped outside were her little tennis shoes before he fell onto his knees, screaming. She was covered in wounds and blood, and one of her arms had been broken. She was still clutching her house key in her hand. She had fought her killer hard, and there was DNA under her fingernails. But these samples would lie dormant for many years, given the fact that forensic technology was in its infancy. Tricia's parents said that she was a dream child, a straight-A student, a debate team champion, and one of the hardest working and kindest people they knew. She was set to study engineering at Purdue University and was most definitely up for any challenges life threw her way. Nobody could believe that anyone would want to hurt her in such a brutal way, and they simply had no names and no suspects. Before long, Tricia Picacho's case went cold. Her mother Diane said that the police had told her, unfortunately some cases just didn't get solved, and that's the way it was. She said, if they thought they were going to turn up on my doorstep and tell me that I have to accept that, they knocked on the wrong door. But sadly for the family, it seemed it had just been them fighting for answers for the last 7 years until it was reopened now that forensic testing had come such a long way. The Cook County Sheriff's Office wanted samples from everybody that had been in contact with Tricia around that time. After she was found on that fateful morning, Michael Gargiulo had actually been one of the first people on the police's radar. He had admitted to driving Tricia to a friend's house 2 days before she was killed. He was also good friends with her brother Doug and a frequent face at the Picacho home. He was questioned by police in 1993, but no charges were filed. And now, almost a decade later, officers wanted to talk to him again. As soon as the murders of Ashley and Tricia were compared, the similarities in the way both women had been killed could not be overlooked. Los Angeles police now needed to find Michael even quicker, and after a few months of looking, they finally located him. The first thing they wanted was a DNA sample, but he refused, saying he had nothing to do with either case. And without a warrant, he wasn't going to hand anything over. With this, the officers had no choice but to leave. They kept tabs on Michael for a while, and when they found out he had briefly been admitted to hospital, they secretly got their DNA sample from there. After a long wait, the results finally came back. Michael Gargiulo's DNA was a positive match to the DNA found under Tricia's fingernails all those years ago. Investigators were so relieved they went straight to the attorney's office looking to seek an indictment for murder. The attorney's office, however, refused to take it any further. They said that the DNA could have been exchanged through casual contact given the fact that Michael knew Tricia and her brother from school. But according to witnesses, Tricia spent the night with many people, including her boyfriend, but the only DNA found on her was Michael's. A second blow came when the LAPD determined that they had no physical evidence tying Michael to the murder of Ashley Ellerin, and they announced that no charges would be filed there either. Detectives had been on the cusp of catching a dangerous killer, and it had slipped through their hands in an instant. But they knew that this had to be their man. They just had to go back through his history and gather as much as they could about his character, prior relationships, and previous crimes. So, who was Michael Gargiulo, and what had led to all of this? Born in 1976, Michael Thomas Gargiulo grew up in a quiet suburb of Glenview, Illinois. He was from a big family, having 7 brothers and sisters. He would tell people he suffered physical abuse at the hands of his father and of the siblings, although these claims were never corroborated. As he entered his teenage years, Michael gained a reputation as a bully with a quick and aggressive temper. He was also known to lie compulsively and exaggerate things all the time. One of his friends recalled he could go from being perfectly pleasant to almost inhuman in a split second. Michael soon started getting arrested for things like breaking into unlocked cars in his school and fighting with people. He developed a fascination with the serial killer Ted Bundy and spent countless hours deep in books about forensic science, something he soon took great pride in knowing a lot about. He told people if he ever got caught committing a crime, he would either know how to get himself out of it or he would lie until he dies. After Tricia was killed in 1993, the Picacho family started receiving gifts from Michael. A t-shirt for Rick, a restaurant voucher, and some flowers for Diane. Michael then showed up at their house asking to talk to Rick. They said it looked like he wanted to get something off his chest. He waited for him to come home for almost an hour before abruptly leaving without saying anything. Rick and Diane were so on edge after the strange encounter. They got straight on the phone and told the detectives what had happened. The police did log it, but it was never followed up on. In 1997, officers saw another chance to try and get Michael to talk about Tricia. He was charged with stealing a car, and police said if he told them what he knew about Tricia's murder, they could cut him a deal on the charges. But he still sat quiet and said nothing at all. Former girlfriends of Michael had horror stories to tell of their time with him. One said when she was 17, he handcuffed and raped her. Another one of Michael's exes said he punched her in the face so hard, she ended up with a detached retina. He threatened to kill her, saying he would be able to get away with it because of his extensive knowledge of forensics. In 1998, Michael decided he was going to go to LA to chase a dream that many share when they move there. He wanted to be an actor and a model. Michael quickly got a job as a bouncer at the Rainbow Bar and Grill on Sunset Boulevard, West Hollywood. No sooner had he been hired, he was let go for punching a customer in the face. During his brief time there, Michael made friends with two other bouncers. They said that Michael had once asked them if they'd ever killed anyone. He then admitted to murdering Tricia Picacho. Back in 1993, I buried a bitch. I left the bitch on the steps for dead, he calmly said. With Michael's reputation as a liar, the two men assumed that this was just another one of his wild stories. In the fall of 2000, Michael met Ashley Ellerin, who at the time was living just across the street from him in Hollywood. He offered to help her change a flat tire and the pair exchanged numbers. This short encounter soon became a fatal obsession. Before long, he was trying to visit her at all hours of the day and night, sitting outside her home in his car and turning up wherever she was. Despite all of this and the DNA matches, 4 years would pass since that fateful day back in February 2001, when Ashley was found dead, and over a decade since Tricia was killed. It was now 2005 and police were still working on both cases. Although they still only had one suspect, they didn't have enough to meet the threshold of what was required to file charges. To their horror and dismay, another shocking and disturbing crime was about to take place across the city. A 32-year-old mother of 4, Maria Bruno, was starting fresh in a new apartment complex in East LA. She had recently separated from her husband, and she moved into a new place, looking forward to a new start. She told everyone she had spent a lot of time choosing the apartment and had picked it because of its security and how safe it felt for her and her young family. She had 2-year-old twins, a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old. Just 10 days after moving in on December 1st, 2005, Maria was found dead by her ex-husband Irving. She had been stabbed 17 times, her throat had been slit, and both her breasts had been cut off. The only clue left at the scene was a blue surgical shoe cover with a small amount of Maria's blood on it. Whoever her killer was, they had broken in via the kitchen window at around 1 a.m. and used one of her own knives to kill her. Experts determined the killer was left-handed. Police's first thought was that Irving might have something to do with it. They had separated on bad terms after their relationship had become more volatile. But Irving said the pair were working on getting their marriage back on track and had even been out for dinner the night before. There were a couple of drops of Maria's blood found inside his car, but he said this was easily explained. While at the restaurant table, Maria cut her finger and a few employees came to help her as well, corroborating what Irving had said. After police ruled him out, they were left with nothing. One detective said it was almost like she was killed for the sake of it and they had nothing to go on, apart from hoping there was some more DNA found on the shoe cover. But a few neighbors had their eyes on another man who was living just across the courtyard from Maria at the time. He always acted and behaved oddly, but in the days and hours leading up to her death, he was acting even more strangely than usual. They gave police a description and a sketch was drawn up. The man they were describing was Michael Gargiulo. Michael was long gone by the time the investigation got underway, and another awful crime would remain unsolved for several years. It was around this time that Trisha's parents back in Illinois finally learned that there had been a hit on the DNA sample from their daughter's case. They were appalled that it had taken them so long to learn about this and that Michael was still out there, free, facing no charges. Another 3 years would pass, taking us to 2008. In an apartment complex in Santa Monica lived 26-year-old Michelle Murphy. Late one April night, Michelle woke up to a man in her bedroom wearing a hoodie and a hat. He launched at her and started stabbing her. Michelle was petite, standing at just 5'1", and before she knew it, she was fighting for her life against someone that was completely overpowering her. She grabbed the blade with both hands, trying to get him to lose control of it. She was screaming so loudly, she knew it was a matter of time before someone heard her. In the last-ditch attempt to get him off her, and with all of her remaining strength, she tucked her knees in towards her chest and pushed both legs out at him, causing him to fall off the bed. After this, her attacker ran out of the room saying, "I'm sorry." Michelle was left battered and bleeding on the bed, but she had survived. She called her boyfriend and he called for help. Her attacker was left-handed, and fortunately had been cut with the blade in the fight, leaving his blood in her apartment. Sure enough, when the Santa Monica Police Department ran the blood through the database, they got a match, and it went right back to the DNA that was found under Trisha Picacio's nails. And they also realized it matched DNA that was found along the elastic part of the blue surgical shoe cover outside Maria Bruno's apartment. Michael Gargiulo's despicable acts weren't stopping or slowing down. Far from it. And finally, with this, after 15 years, his horrific crime spree would come to an end. In June 2008, he was placed under arrest for the attempted murder of Michelle Murphy and held on a $1.1 million bail. A search of his car uncovered many items of evidentiary value, including some blue surgical shoe covers. 3 months later, Michael was also charged with the murders of both Ashley Ellerin and Maria Bruno. However, it would take until 2011 for Michael to be charged with the murder of Trisha Picaccio too. Because Trisha's case had happened in Illinois and Ashley, Maria and Michelle were all in California, it meant that Michael would have to have 2 separate trials in both states. Michael Gargiulo pleaded not guilty to all charges, and after many pushbacks due to him hiring and firing lawyers and some attempted escapes from prison, in May 2019, his California trial finally got underway. By this point, it had taken Michael longer to go to trial than any other inmates in the history of the LA County Jail. His defense team said he had suffered mental health issues and was unable to recall attacking Michelle, and it was up to a jury to decide if he was sane at the time or not. This would obviously result in a very different possible sentence, so this decision was not made lightly. A jury found Michael Gargiulo sane, and this paved the way for prosecutors to seek the death penalty if he was found guilty. 36,000 pages of evidence had been gathered and hundreds of witnesses were called to testify, 2 of which were Michelle Murphy and Ashton Kutcher. The prosecution painted a damning picture of Michael Gargiulo. They laid out his patterns of behavior, his past relationships, the fact he was left-handed, the DNA evidence, and where he lived in relation to all the women. The jury then left the courtroom to go and see the apartment buildings and get a clearer idea of just how close Michael was to them, and how easy it would have been for him to see into their homes and keep tabs on them. Michael's defense team, however, raised the fact that no evidence had actually been found in Ashley's home. There was no DNA, no witnesses. It was purely circumstantial evidence, which they argued threw into question the entire trial. Ashley Ellerin's landlord, Mark, then became the defense's focus, and they argued it was entirely possible. After they had slept together that evening, he had killed her. They said this was further corroborated by the fact that when Ashton called her, she told him she was just getting out of the shower, and Mark had already admitted to being there at that time. They said given how she was found, how soon after she got out of the shower she was killed, and the fact that just after 8:30 a neighbor heard something, it put Mark right there at the time, and he was most definitely not in the clear. They also said that the DNA found near Maria Bruno's home was probably because Michael was a repairman at the time. He could have worn a pair of these during a job on the complex and innocently become caught up in the investigation. His lawyer pointed towards her estranged ex-husband and their toxic marriage. The prosecution, however, said that this was nothing more than a desperate attempt to point the finger at innocent people that had already been cleared by police many years ago. Given Michael's obsession with Ashley Ellerin, he was likely watching her bungalow all evening. When he saw Mark leave, he spotted his opportunity and ran over, taking him just seconds. Ashley could have opened the door straight away, thinking it was Mark coming back to get something, and, as it was just a matter of minutes later, she would still be in her robe from the shower. They said the same could be applied to Maria Bruno, and the DNA evidence was clear. As it was in the case of Michelle Murphy, the trial was a grueling one for everybody. Even reporters who were seasoned in these type of cases and knew them pretty well often had to turn their heads away because the evidence was so graphic and gruesome. As everything came to an end, it was now up to the jury. Despite the defense's arguments, Michael Gargiulo was found guilty on all charges, and in late 2019, the jury unanimously reached the conclusion that he should be sentenced to death, believing no other sentence was appropriate. Their recommendation was heard and agreed upon. And in 2021, 45-year-old Michael Gargiulo was sentenced to death for the murders of Ashley Ellerin and Maria Bruno. He is unlikely to be put to death anytime soon, however, as the state of California has not executed anyone since 2006. And Governor Gavin Newsom halted executions for as long as he is in office. But courts have been working on the assumption that executions may one day resume. Los Angeles Superior Court Judge Larry Paul Feidler said, "This case, everywhere that Mr. Gargiulo went, death and destruction followed. Ashley's parents, Maria's ex-husband Irving, and Trisha's family, among others, all gave powerful victims' impact statements. All Michael Gargiulo had to say was, 'I'm gonna death row wrongfully. I've been framed by tunnel vision detectives.'" Michael will now face extradition to begin trial for Trisha's murder, but this date has not yet been confirmed. Officers from all forces that dealt with this believe that unfortunately there will be more victims out there. During one of Michael's police interviews, he gave several partial confessions alluding to killing at least 10 women, but he refuses to give any further details. The police continue to follow up on leads and tips and hope that a fuller picture will be painted over time and more closure can be found in doing so. They also admit that there were many failings within the investigations and how things were handled. "I can't put a happy face on this because we dropped the ball. No ifs, ands, or buts about it," said one of the detectives. When asked about the fact that Cook County prosecutors refused to seek an indictment for Trisha's murder sooner, another detective said, "I'm not privy to everything they have, but I gotta say, if I'd had evidence like that, you'd bet that the LA District Attorney's Office would have had a filing, and these other girls wouldn't be dead. Plain and simple, they wouldn't be dead." For the family and friends that Trisha, Ashley, and Maria left behind, the brutal way in which they were killed will forever haunt them. Vibrant, determined young women, all in exciting new places, their lives so cruelly snatched away in such a frightening way. Trisha's father, Rick, said, "People talk about closure, but there is no closure. That void is always there." And for Michael's former partners who were subjected to such torment, and Michelle, who almost died at his hands, their lives are forever changed as well. Michelle said she dreads going to sleep every night and is equally terrified to wake up. The devastation caused to so many people over those 15 years is unimaginable and unfathomable. It is safe to assume that Michael's crimes would have continued had it not been for his capture. The lengths he had already gone to prove he had no limits and knew no bounds. And it is terrifying to think about what could have happened next and to potentially so many more people. 9-year-old Elizabeth Olton was the youngest of 3 children and lived with her mother Patty in St. Martin's, Missouri, a small rural town of just over 1,000 people. Elizabeth loved all things theater and performing and had just been cast in the school play, which she was throwing herself into wholeheartedly. She was running through her lines every day with anyone that would read the other parts with her, practicing her songs and asking her siblings to act alongside her. She would find any excuse to dress up and sing along to Hannah Montana and Taylor Swift. Everyone said she was a very sweet, innocent, and kind-hearted girl, always so friendly and caring and looking out for everyone she knew. She and her mother Patty were especially close, loving to bake together and play puzzles and games. October 21st, 2009 was a typical Wednesday. Everybody was back from school and the dinner was being cooked. One of Elizabeth's friends, Emma, knocked on Patty's door and asked if Elizabeth could go out and play with her. Patty at first said no because it was a school night and the family meal was almost ready. But after her daughter heard Emma at the door, both girls were relentless in trying to go out together, jumping up and down and begging for Patty to let them go. Emma lived just 4 houses away and the pair and their other siblings were at each other's homes a lot. Patty told Elizabeth she had 1 hour and no more and she wanted her home by 6:15 p.m. Elizabeth was still not home, and it was 15 minutes past the agreed time, which for a child as conscientious as Elizabeth was a reason to be concerned. The sun was setting and Patty said there was no way her daughter would still be out voluntarily as she was terrified of the dark. Patty called her phone, but it went straight to voicemail. She then rang Emma's grandmother Karen, whom Emma and her siblings lived with. To her horror, Karen said she hadn't seen Elizabeth either, and she had no idea that Emma had even knocked at her door that afternoon. Patty hung up straight away and called the police. By 6:30, officers were at Patty's house and combing through the area. The street the family lived on was very close to about 60 acres of woodland, and this was a huge yet overwhelming focus for the search teams. The police headed over to Emma's house, but they all maintained she hadn't been there. Karen and Gary, Emma's grandparents, were so upset they had no idea this had all happened, but they simply couldn't give any information that would help. All they could do was join in the search, despite the fact their houses were connected by the street, which would have only taken a few minutes to walk. Emma said they had been walking through and around the woods and had been darting in and out of the neighboring lawns and backyards. She said an hour later, the incredibly diligent Elizabeth set off home as instructed. Emma said she watched her walk off and that was the last time she had seen her. Officers said they still couldn't see any evidence that pointed towards foul play, or anything untoward, suggesting maybe she had become lost in the woods. To which Patty replied, "She's 9 years old. She wouldn't just walk off by herself." Soon, almost a third of the whole town was out and looking, but the search party eventually had to slow down and stop for the night because of how dark it was. As soon as the sun rose, they were out in force again. A few hours later, with the concern continuing to mount, the FBI was called in to help, and they moved quickly. Registered sex offenders in the area were all interviewed. Each car coming in and out was stopped and searched. Dive teams and helicopters were deployed, and sniffer dogs were brought in too. The team started looking at Elizabeth's phone activity and ordered the information from her cell phone provider. The data arrived quickly and showed that her phone was still on and was actually pinging near her home and in the woods. It was now 24 hours later, a painfully long amount of time when dealing with a missing child. There were no items of clothing found, no dropped phone, no clues at all. Unfortunately, when they were searching the location that linked to her phone battery suddenly went dead and the ping stopped. The forest was dense, dark, damp and cold, and there was a huge amount of ground to cover. The more time that was passing, the less likely it was seeming that they were going to have a positive outcome in the search for Elizabeth. Elizabeth's phone records also came back and they were able to look at her last contacts and messages, as well as some of the Patty and several others that could be easily accounted for. She had received a call that afternoon from someone called Alyssa. 6-year-old Emma then asked to talk to the police again. She now had a new story but seemed scared to tell the detectives. She said that her half-sister had been the one to get her to knock on Elizabeth's door that afternoon. Her half-sister was 15-year-old Alyssa Bustamante. Emma said that when the two were outside playing together, Alyssa came and joined them and encouraged Emma to leave them alone. Elizabeth said she had to head home and started walking off. This timed perfectly with the call that came from Alyssa. Emma walked back to her house and stayed outside playing alone, leaving Elizabeth and Alyssa out together. A while later, Emma, who was now back in her garden, fell over and caught herself on some thorns. She called out for help. Alyssa heard her from her bedroom and came outside. Emma said as she was helping her, she noticed something that looked like blood on Alyssa's clothes. Detectives asked Alyssa a few routine questions, and despite the fact she seemed open and forthcoming, something about what Emma had told them wasn't sitting right. If what Emma was saying was true, it meant that she hadn't been the last person to see Elizabeth that day. As far as they now knew, it was actually 15-year-old Alyssa Bustamante. It was now 48 hours later, and the investigating team had to regroup. It was now glaringly obvious that Elizabeth had not run away. She had either been led somewhere or forced somewhere, and officers started looking closer to home. As they began doing rounds of the houses again, a search party inside the woods made a strange discovery. A group of volunteers had stumbled upon a huge hole that had been dug up, then covered back over. They alerted police right away, but there was nothing under the soil. There was still no sign of Elizabeth or anything belonging to her in that area. When detectives had been at the Bustamante house talking to Emma and Alyssa, they had noticed several holes in the garden that looked similar in size and shape to this one. Given this, a warrant was issued to properly and intensely search the home. Although Elizabeth definitely hadn't been there that day, she would often go over and play, so they needed to take a good look around. Everything seemed normal and in order until they entered Alyssa's room. Painted a very troubling and chilling picture. Everything was everywhere, and there was writing all over the walls, some parts in blood. There was also a drawing of an outline of a person with the name Emma next to it, her 6-year-old sister. Cards from her father, who was in prison, were scattered around the room, and buried under everything, detectives found Alyssa's diary. One entry read, "I don't talk about it, I bottle it up, and when I explode, someone's gonna die." They also noticed a paragraph that was scribbled over in blue pen. Fortunately, investigators were able to uncover some of the original writing by shining a light on the back of the paper. 2 words stood out: slit and throat. Despite Alyssa saying she had been at school that day, it would turn out she had actually skipped lessons, and her whereabouts around the time Elizabeth was last seen as Emma was saying goodbye to her weren't able to be confirmed by anyone either. Things were slowly being pieced together, but there were still so many gaps. Alyssa's diary was seized by the FBI and handed over to Sergeant David Rice, who was now preparing to interview the teen. Born in 1994, Alyssa came from a troubled and very broken family. Both her parents had substance addictions. Her father was in and out of prison, and her mother would often leave the family home on drugs binges. Eventually, Alyssa and her siblings went to live with her grandparents, Karen and Gary, who soon gained full custody of them. Karen said she adored Alyssa, and although the children had had a tough life, she did her best to raise them well, shower them with love and care, and be a constant and supportive presence in their lives. As she entered her teenage years, Alyssa started self-harming and expressing suicidal feelings. She was admitted into a psychiatric hospital after she overdosed and began to cut words into her arms. Doctors that assessed her described her as violent and angry. She was diagnosed with severe depression and prescribed antidepressants. When she was released, things only began to get worse and more concerning. On her various social media platforms, she changed her list of hobbies to killing people and cutting. She often told friends and her boyfriend she wanted to know what it was like to kill someone and had a dream of burning down a house with a family inside. Her Twitter feed talked about a hatred of authority and people telling her what to do. One of her posts read, "Bad decisions make great stories." She also posted a video to her YouTube channel called "Idiots Getting Electrocuted by Electric Fence." The video showed her trying to get her 2 brothers to touch a fence that she knew would electrocute them. A disturbing pattern of behavior was clear to see, and the more the FBI looked into her background, the more they found pointed towards her being a dangerous individual that wanted to inflict pain on people in the worst ways imaginable. After going through her diary some more, Sergeant Reese Astelis had to come in for a formal interview alongside her grandmother and a juvenile officer. He said as the interview progressed, his tactic was to ask a question and sit in silence for as long as possible, sometimes for up to a minute at a time. He said as uncomfortable as it was, he knew the team would break eventually if there was something to say, which he was certain there was. He needed to know what had happened to Elizabeth that day, and he wasn't going to stop until he got to the truth. Alyssa started off by recounting her day. She said she had come back from school at around 3:30 and then had gone for a walk in the forest at around 5 p.m. They now knew she was never at school that day, so she was already trapping herself in lies. She said she was supposed to take Emma on a walk with her, but ditched her as she was annoying and instead went walking alone. She claimed she had come back about an hour later and was up in her room when she heard Emma shouting for help from outside. Sergeant Rice got her to retrace her steps with a map he had printed out. Alyssa said after this, everybody went to church and got home at around 8 p.m. Rice then changed the line of questioning and moved onto the holes around her garden and around the woods. Alyssa calmly admitted to having dug them herself, but said it was because she liked digging holes and sometimes buried dead animals in them. He then said, "What kind of person do you think would do this to a 9-year-old girl?" Alyssa shrugged and said, "I don't know, a sick person. Someone that can put down all their morals." She was still maintaining that she had never been out with Elizabeth on her own. It was always in a group of siblings, and she had been trying her best to help find her as well. After this, he started asking questions about Elizabeth's phone, explaining that the data did not lie and it was indicating that her phone was somewhere behind Alyssa's house, which she showed her on a map. He then moved on to Alyssa's house and her bedroom. When Rice confronted her about the entries, including the one that had been scribbled over, the interview would take a drastic turn. Alyssa said the pair had been playing out in the forest and Elizabeth had fallen, hit her head and died instantly. Panicked, she had tried to conceal her body by burning it. But given the final entry in her diary, Rice knew this wasn't true. But it was the start of the truth coming out. He just had to keep chipping away and poking holes in her stories. The entry in her diary that had been scribbled over had now been completely uncovered, and it read as follows. "I just fucking killed someone. I strangled them and slit their throats and stabbed them. Now they're dead. I don't know how to feel at the moment. It was amazing. As soon as you get over the, oh my god, I can't do this feeling, it's pretty enjoyable. I'm kinda nervous and shaky though right now. 'Kay, I gotta go to church now. Lol." It had been written on the same day Elizabeth had gone missing, October 21st. Rice told her they would find Elizabeth's body eventually, and when they did, an autopsy would tell them the full story. Alyssa told Rice that she had bumped into Elizabeth and Emma outside, and once Emma had gone, everything started to unravel. Despite her denials, it was pre-planned. She was already armed with a kitchen knife. Holding the 9-year-old's hand, the pair walked for 15 minutes, deep into the forest. With Alyssa telling her she had something to show her, they just had to walk further in. Once they reached a certain spot, Alyssa said she beat and strangled her before slitting her throat and stabbing her repeatedly. The fear that Elizabeth must have felt as the forest got darker and she realized her life was in danger is unimaginable. Alyssa then said she had attempted to burn her body before digging a hole to bury her and disposing of everything else in the creek. However, Rice knew that the hole had not been dug on that day. It had been dug days before, as were all the other holes they had found. She didn't go out there with a shovel or anything she could have used to do this, and there was no way she could have killed Elizabeth, dug a hole to bury her, and been back home within the hour to go to church. If Rice could get her to admit to pre-digging the hole, it would help to prove premeditation. Everybody still found it hard to believe that Alyssa had managed to do this all by herself, but she swore it was just her, and she was the only one that knew about it. Alyssa Bustamante agreed to take Rice to her remains, and with this, just 15 minutes from her home, the search for Elizabeth Alton came to a devastating end. A day after Elizabeth was found, police announced that they had placed the 15-year-old under arrest, and she had been charged with first-degree murder. The neighborhood was horrified. Police had also interviewed Alyssa's boyfriend and asked him to undertake a polygraph test. Although they suspected he likely knew something had happened, they determined he didn't have anything to do with the murder of Elizabeth, and he was never implicated in anything, other than the fact she had just wanted to know what it was like to kill someone. Given her diary entry, there was no other explanation. She had dug 2 graves in the weeks before and essentially waited for an opportunity. It remains undetermined who, if anyone, the second grave was intended for, but police suspected she was actually planning to kill her 2 younger brothers. On October 28th, a week after she had gone missing, 9-year-old Elizabeth Alton was laid to rest. Her favorite color was pink, and her funeral was filled with the color. A horse-drawn carriage carried her pink and white casket. The community was a close one, and it was packed with people standing along the sides and waiting outside. The emergency responders and investigators were also sat in the first several rows. The case had deeply affected and moved everybody. In November 2009, despite her lawyers pushing for her to get a lesser charge on the grounds of a troubled childhood and her age, the judge ruled that Elizabeth Bustamante would be tried as an adult, and she was therefore indicted. She entered a plea of not guilty, and trial preparation got underway. Just as Elizabeth's family and the prosecution thought they were finally getting somewhere, a huge blow came. In June 2011, her defense team requested that her lengthy confession to Sergeant Rice was thrown out. A judge ruled that because of her age and the line of questioning put forward by the juvenile officer working alongside Rice, at least part of her statement would not be admissible in court. After this, her trial was delayed and set for early 2012. The prosecution knew they were really up against it, and after going back and forth, thinking of the best approach, they decided to offer the option of a plea deal to Alyssa. Second-degree murder instead of first-degree murder. With this, Alyssa Bustamante withdrew her not guilty plea for first-degree murder and pleaded guilty to second-degree murder instead. This also spared her the chances of receiving the death penalty. The courtroom was packed. Everybody wanted to know what would happen. As part of the deal, Alyssa had to recount what had happened that day. As she went through what she had done in all its awful detail, reporters in the court said the tension was palpable, with everybody sitting in stunned silence. Her defense team also spoke and leaned heavily on her childhood and upbringing, mental health issues, and claiming that her prescribed medication made her more prone to violence. Despite all of this, Alyssa Bustamante was sentenced to life in prison for second-degree murder and 30 years for armed criminal action, and the sentences were to be served consecutively. Several months after she pleaded guilty, however, the United States Supreme Court ruled that juveniles cannot face automatic life sentences without the possibility of parole. So under Missouri's law, Alyssa may seek parole after 30 years. Hattie gave a speech at her sentencing. She was so upset and physically shaking, the judge eventually asked her to stop talking. All Alyssa could say in response was, "I cannot even understand what you guys are going through," adding that she would give her life to bring Elizabeth back. A detective said it was in this moment Karen and Gary got up and walked out of the courtroom, and everybody could see Alyssa suddenly realize that the only two people that had stuck by her and tried to be a constant in her life had just walked away. Patty said that everything that came out of Alyssa's mouth was a lie. She had no remorse, and she was being told what to say by her lawyers. The prosecutor, Mark Richardson, said he had never seen anything like this in his life, and he hoped to never have to try a case like it again. The motive has to be the most senseless, reprehensible that could be in humankind, and that is to take a life for a thrill, he said. A forensic psychologist added it was clear from her patterns of behavior over the years, it was only a matter of time before she killed somebody. Went on to sue not only Alyssa, but the hospital where Alyssa sought treatment. She believes that the healthcare system should have seen the red flags and taken preventative measures. A judge threw out the lawsuit against the hospital, but the lawsuit against Alyssa was successful, and she will ultimately owe Patty $5 million. Alyssa appealed her sentence in 2014, but this was denied. The events that transpired so very quickly on October 21, 2009 rocked the town and shattered the closeness of the community. Patty said she misses her daughter's kindness and her ability to see the good in everyone and everything. A friendly and innocent young girl, excited for her starring role in the school play, just playing with her friends and siblings, enjoying the simple pleasures that childhood brings. Her life was snatched away in the most frightening way imaginable, and the damage done to so many people on that day will forever be felt. On November 22, 2013, Jeanette Grimm attempted to contact her 41-year-old daughter Holly Grimm multiple times without success. Concerned, she decided to visit Holly's trailer, only to find it in disarray for the first time. Adding to the mystery was the fact that Holly's asthma inhaler, which she always carried, was left behind. The question remains, what could have transpired? Why was the trailer in such a state? And where could Holly have disappeared to without her essential inhaler? The narrative commences in Macungie, Pennsylvania, the second oldest municipality in Lehigh County. Situated in the Lehigh Valley metropolitan region, it serves as a suburb of Allentown. Presently, Lower Macungie is renowned for its exquisite residential complexes. It has emerged as one of the most sought-after areas in the Lehigh Valley for families who have chosen to make it their home due to the township's picturesque surroundings, vast expanses of open space, and outstanding educational institutions. Holly Grimm was born to Jeanette and Richard Grimm in 1972. During her teenage years, she developed a fondness for bowling and would frequently engage in the sport with her friends on weekends. She was an ardent supporter of Dale Earnhardt. Holly was employed at Allen Organ in Macungie, Pennsylvania. Her bond with her mother, Jeanette, was exceptionally strong, as they would always converse on the phone before Holly commenced her workday. They resided in close proximity to each other, both residing in the Red Maple Trailer Park. Although Holly was not acquainted with many of her neighbors, she shared a close friendship with Tammy. Together, Holly and Tammy would regularly accompany their children to the school bus stop in the mornings. On the morning of November 22, 2013, Jeanette grew increasingly anxious when Holly failed to answer her calls. She made 3 trips to Holly's trailer and noticed that her car remained parked in the driveway. Possessing a key to Holly's trailer, Jeanette swung open the door and was taken aback by the eerie silence that enveloped the space. Upon entering the premises, she immediately noticed a coffee mug on the floor and an ashtray toppled beside the couch, sending a shiver down her spine. Her astonishment grew when she spotted Holly's asthma inhaler still resting on the nightstand. It was unlike Holly to leave without it. Hastily, she made her way out of the trailer. However, upon re-entering her vehicle, an unsettling feeling engulfed her. Seeking answers, she decided to visit Holly's boyfriend's house, hoping to find her there. Unfortunately, he informed Jeanette that he hadn't seen Holly recently, intensifying the gravity of the situation. Jeanette fell silent, her mind racing with troubling thoughts. In a desperate attempt, she dialed Holly's office, only to learn that Holly had never shown up for work and hadn't notified anyone about taking time off. Anxiety consumed Jeanette as unsettling possibilities flooded her mind. Left with no other choice, she promptly contacted the Macungie Police Department. Police arrived swiftly, and Jeanette wasted no time in briefing them on the situation, handing over Holly's trailer keys. As the officers entered the trailer, they discovered Holly's car keys on the floor near the entrance and her glasses on the coffee table. While searching the premises, they noticed a still damp coffee stain and a solitary black button that didn't match anything in Holly's wardrobe. Further investigation revealed that the rear door of the trailer was open. There were no signs of forced entry. However, A vivid crimson stain outside the entrance caught their attention. Upon testing, it was determined to be human DNA, although not belonging to Holly. The forensic examiner noted that the lack of environmental changes indicated that it had been recently left on the door, providing valuable information. Upon receiving the information from the police, Jeanette expressed her disbelief, stating that Holly never left the house in that manner, and that the back door was always closed. The police quickly realized that the trailers were tightly packed together and decided to investigate if any of the neighbors had noticed anything unusual. One of the officers approached the trailers near Holly's residence and began questioning the residents. Tammy, Holly's close friend, was the first to speak with the police. Due to their strong bond, Tammy informed the police that she and Holly had waited together for the bus that morning, just like they always did. Tammy mentioned that after dropping off their children at the bus stop and engaging in a light conversation, they went their separate ways towards their respective trailers. Holly went to her car and got in, but moments later she unexpectedly exited the vehicle and walked towards her trailer as if she had heard something. She paused and turned her head as if trying to locate the source of the sound behind her trailer. Despite searching, she appeared to find nothing. After some time, Tammy emerged from her own trailer and heard a loud thud emanating from Holly's residence. She noted that when she left for work, Holly's car was still in the driveway, which was unusual since Holly typically left for work before her. Despite these peculiar occurrences, Tammy did not take any immediate action or inform anyone. When the police were unable to locate Holly's phone, they sought assistance from the American Telephone and Telegraph Company, who confirmed that Jeanette had called Holly 3 times as she had previously informed the police. They stated that the phone was still active and indicated that Holly was heading northeast. However, they were unable to determine the phone's exact location thereafter, suggesting that it may have been turned off or damaged. With this new information, the police decided to delve deeper into Holly's life. When they visited Allen, Oregon, Holly's workplace, the entire staff was shocked by the news of her disappearance. However, when Holly's coworkers were interviewed, they provided some intriguing information. They informed the police about a peculiar occurrence involving their colleague, Michael Horvath. According to them, Michael, who was typically very punctual, arrived unusually late that morning. This prompted the police to initiate a search for Michael. As they delved deeper into his life, they uncovered a multitude of strange details. Michael G. Horvath was born in 1967 and resided in Ross Township, Macungie in 2013. He lived with his wife, Kathy. The locals of Ross Township regarded Michael as an enigmatic individual. Even in the office, he possessed an eccentric demeanor. Additionally, Michael had engaged in an extramarital affair with a woman named Nicole, whom he had met on an online platform in July 2013. Despite their frequent online conversations, Nicole claimed that she never developed romantic feelings for Michael. They had only met in person once, and even then, she felt uneasy around him. Nicole declined his subsequent invitation due to plans to accompany her husband to the mall. In response, Michael made a disturbing remark, stating that he would follow them around the mall. Despite this unsettling incident, Nicole remained in contact with him. On the day Holly disappeared, Michael even called her. Furthermore, Michael owned a farm surrounded by forests where he often went hunting deer. He possessed a soundproof trailer in the woods equipped with a winch for skinning and dismembering animals. Interestingly, Michael had not shown an interest in serial killer shows until the television series Dexter premiered. He developed a fascination with the character of Dexter and aspired to become a serial murderer like him. The series finale aired in September 2013, and 2 months later, Holly Grimm vanished from her trailer. On December 12, 2013, the police conducted their first interrogation with Michael. Upon seeing him enter the room, they perceived him as a balding, overweight man who appeared restless and concluded that he posed no significant threat. Police conducted an interview with him solely regarding his tardiness to work on that particular day. According to his account, he experienced a flat tire while en route to work, prompting him to pull over at an off-ramp to inflate it. He then drove back home to change the tire before returning to his workplace, resulting in his late arrival. However, due to a lack of evidence, they were unable to detain him. Consequently, they took no further action and released him. In March 2014, after more than 2 decades of employment, Michael made the decision to resign from his position at Allen, Oregon. This caught the attention of the police, who were still searching for the missing Holly Grimm. Subsequently, they decided to monitor his activities. Finally, in August 2015, the police approached Michael's wife, Kathy, to discuss the day Holly Grimm disappeared. Kathy informed them that upon returning home from work, she discovered Michael's soiled shoes in the bedroom and the lights on, indicating that he had missed a day of work. She also mentioned witnessing Michael engaged in an activity in the nearby woods, although she was uncertain about the nature of his actions. Shortly after, while rummaging through the garbage, Kathy stumbled upon a bottle of chloroform and Michael's date books, which contained information about Holly's whereabouts. Overwhelmed by this discovery, she confessed everything to the police. However, despite her revelations, she remained steadfast in her belief that Michael was innocent and incapable of committing murder. In March 2016, the police devised a plan by leaving a written message on Michael's truck's windshield insinuating that they were aware of his involvement in Holly Grimm's case. Their hope was that this would frighten him enough to lead them to the location where he had placed Holly. Unfortunately, this tactic did not yield any results. Subsequently, they conducted another interview with Michael in September 2016. During the interview, he confessed to delivering some items to Holly's residence in 2012. Specifically, he sold her a dryer and washer. Additionally, the police managed to obtain a blood sample from Michael. This was done because he claimed to have sustained injuries while handling the washer and dryer. However, through meticulous laboratory analysis, it was determined that the blood found on the door was recent, not from years ago. Subsequently, when the DNA results came back, they confirmed that the blood on the back door of Holly's trailer belonged to him. This provided sufficient grounds for the police to obtain a search warrant for his home. They were aware that the findings would be unsettling. Initially, the investigation focused on combing through the area of his farm. During this process, law enforcement stumbled upon a shallow embankment where they discovered small bone fragments and a few rib bones. Furthermore, they found a fragment of a scapula that exhibited what appeared to be a gunshot wound. It was suspected that he had exhumed the bones and incinerated them in a fire pit on his property. The individual who made this discovery informed the police that he believed some of the dirt and pebbles covering the remains had been brought in from elsewhere. The forensic team later confirmed that Holly's remains were among those analyzed. The search of his house took several days to complete. Within the residence, a diary was discovered containing detailed records of Holly, her child, her boyfriend, and their daily activities. The notebook even documented the specific times when the lights in Holly's kitchen, bedroom, and bathroom were turned on and off. Additionally, any loud noises originating from within Holly's trailer were meticulously noted. What followed was even more unsettling. He had drawn a map highlighting all the shadowy areas surrounding Holly's residence. Furthermore, he possessed photographs of Holly taken during his visits to her home for product deliveries. The police also uncovered pictures of Holly's bedroom, which were taken when he entered the trailer while she was absent. However, that was not all. The diary also documented the movements of other women, including a high school student he had been pursuing. Authorities uncovered lock-picking tools that he had utilized to gain access to the trailer. Additionally, they discovered multiple pairs of handcuffs, a bottle of chloroform, and stun guns. Among his possessions, law enforcement also found a firearm believed to be the murder weapon. Disturbing images of women being rendered unconscious with chloroform and a film titled Hunting Humans were also uncovered by the authorities. Holly's mother, Jeanette, took on the responsibility of raising Holly's child, but unfortunately, she passed away in March 2017. Although finding her daughter's body may have brought her some solace, she did not live to witness justice being served. The trial of Michael Gene Horvath concluded in June 2022 with a guilty verdict. While the prosecution sought the death penalty, it took an additional 3 months for the final sentence to be handed down. On September 8, 2022, Michael Horvath was sentenced to life imprisonment in Monroe County. Upon hearing the sentence, Michael expressed, "I apologize for their loss, but Your Honor, I maintain my innocence in this murder case and I will continue to fight until the very end." 30-year-old Patricia Stichler lived in Sylvania, Ohio with her 3 daughters in 1985. She was divorced and worked for more than 7 years with the 21st Century Health Spots. Patricia's body was found by her 11-year-old daughter in the early morning hours of January 2, 1985. Someone had entered their home and slashed her throat while she slept. Patricia's 3 daughters were sleeping in their beds down the hall when the crime occurred. A window in the home had been left open, though it was unclear whether it was opened by Patricia or someone else. Investigators said that there were no signs of forced entry. Fortunately, there was a DNA sample from the crime scene that belonged to an unknown male. In 1985, Authorities were unable to identify a suspect, despite a thorough investigation. 2 new detectives were assigned to the case in 1998, but once again, it remained unsolved, even with the help of the Ohio Bureau of Investigation. The DNA profile became the focus of the investigation. Police enlisted the help of multiple agencies, including the Ohio BCI Forensic Lab and Lucas County Prosecutor's Office. They also established a new partnership with Advanced DNA Forensic Genealogy. Using genetic genealogy, experts determined the DNA belonged to Michael Mellis, whom investigators later determined was less than 100 feet from Patricia's home on the night her life was taken. He was 17 years old at the time and in high school. He lived on the same street as Patricia. His residence was across the street and just 6 houses away. Police say Mellis was not acquainted with Patricia or her family and would not have had any reason to be inside the victim's home. Mellis kicked the bucket before he could face prosecution. He joined the U.S. Army after graduating high school and lost his life in a single-vehicle car accident in 1989 while stationed in North Carolina. For Patricia's surviving daughters, who vowed to see their mother's case solved, questions remained. How did he get into their home? Did he see them? Why didn't he take their lives? Kristen Kelly, one of the daughters, said, "Help us understand the unknowns. Help her children end their suffering because it's not fair to any of us." The case of Christina and Thompson Harris. Christina and Thompson and Jason Thomas Harris, both 40, had been married for 11 years by 2014. They got married in 2003 after dating for about 5 years. In 2009, Christina and Jason welcomed their first child, which brought significant changes to their lives. Despite the daily challenges and responsibilities, they were happy to be parents. Christina took care of the house and the children while Jason worked at a plastics factory. As the children grew up, Christina was able to contribute financially to the family by working. However, in May 2014, she had to take maternity leave because she was expecting their second child in a few weeks. On September 29, 2014, Jason chatted with Christina while at work. Christina was suffering from a cold. She had a bad cough and was not sleeping well, but she reassured her husband that she was fine. A few hours later, Jason called his wife at home but received no response, which worried him. Unable to reach Christina, Jason asked a neighbor to check on her. He explained that Christina was sick and not answering the phone. The neighbor knocked on the front door but got no answer, so she called Christina's name. Receiving no response, she decided to try the door, found it unlocked, and entered the house. When she entered the bedroom, she found Christina lying on the bed and could not wake her. The neighbor called 911 and ran out of the house to call another neighbor, a nurse. The nurse checked Christina's pulse and confirmed that she had died. Thus, on September 29, 2014, for months after the birth of her second child, Christina was found dead at home. When the police arrived, Jason Harris was present. He told the police and paramedics that his wife had been sick but was alive when he left for work that morning. 2 days later, the medical examiner ruled that Christina died from an overdose of a controlled substance, a finding that shocked her family and friends. Most people who knew Christina, a mother of 2, including a newborn, believed that she had never used drugs. Christina's mother, Kathy, told police that her daughter was fine when she saw her the day before she died. Police were therefore skeptical of Jason Harris's claim that his wife had a cold. According to Kathy, Christina said her marriage to Jason was complicated. Jason was unhappy with the marriage but did not want a divorce because of concerns about child support and custody. Neighbors who discovered Christina's body also provided additional information to the police. Jason reportedly told them that the night before Christina died, he had prepared cereal with milk for her. Then Christina passed out and dropped the plate. Police realized that Christina's family and friends had a hard time accepting that she might be involved in drugs. Instead, police suspected that Jason Harris was involved in Christina's death. Christina's mother and sisters insisted that police test her breast milk. According to Kathy, the police ignored the request for 48 hours. However, thanks to the family's persistence, the police finally agreed to investigate. As a result, breast milk was used as evidence for the first time in Michigan history. As confirmed by Christina's family and friends, all drug tests at her workplace and at the hospital where she gave birth to her second child were negative. Her second child was only 4 months old when Christina died. Christina was breastfeeding, and Kathy confirmed that Christina was very careful about what she put into her body because she didn't want to affect her child. Christina often pumped breast milk while at work and stored it in the freezer. Some of the breast milk was left at Kathy's mother's house. They tested 3 bags of breast milk for possible drug residue. These bags were labeled with the date they were put in the freezer so Christina knew which bag to thaw first. Experts tested all the samples, including the ones frozen just before Christina died, and found no signs of drugs. This proves that Christina did not use the substance that killed her. Jason Harris's sister was the only one who suggested that Christina had used drugs, prompting investigators to focus more on Jason and treat Christina's death as a homicide. The investigation was slow, and it is unclear what would have happened if Christina's family had not been actively involved in the search for the truth. Kathy repeatedly reminded Davison police about her daughter's case in August 2016, nearly 2 years after Christina's death. Not seeing the enthusiasm and desire to solve her daughter's case in Davison, Kathy asked Davison police to turn the case over to the Michigan State Police, which had new investigators. From there, the story began to unravel. Police gathered a lot of information about Jason Harris, including how he acted before and after his wife's death. Jason had been having affairs with other women. Christina knew about this and confided in her family and co-workers that Jason had been texting other people while she was giving birth to their youngest child. Christina once told a co-worker that if she died, Jason would be the cause. When asked if she was serious, she said yes. Jason told his co-worker that he suspected the second child was not his biological child. He also complained that after the birth, Christina became depressed, often stayed in bed and did not go to work. Jason often complained about Christina nagging him. A coworker of Jason recalled that Jason may have told him that he wanted Christina dead. He described the relationship between Jason and Christina as toxic and recalled that they argued frequently. One of the most surprising and shocking things about this case is that Jason Harris did not hesitate to let everyone know that he wanted to get rid of his wife. He tried to do so, but unfortunately, no one paid attention to his words and actions before Christina died. Jason bought poison twice and mixed it into her drink. Both times, Christina felt that the taste was unusual and did not drink it. Jason then asked a coworker to find him a poison that would not change the taste or smell of drinks or food. Jason said he wanted to knock Christina unconscious so she would not feel anything. When he shared with the coworker that Christina would not drink water because it tasted strange, the coworker refused to talk to him further. The coworker testified that Jason had talked about wanting Christina to stop nagging, and that the coworker thought Jason was joking. Jason also told a coworker that he had hired someone to kill Christina, but the person was arrested for another reason before the murder. Jason therefore offered the coworker $10,000 from Christina's $100,000 life insurance policy to kill her. The coworker refused the offer, thinking that Jason was just venting his anger by talking about his wife and making inappropriate jokes. According to the colleague, he recalled a conversation with Jason in which Jason said, "I'm bored with her. I'm going to dump her." The police then decided to question the neighbor who discovered Christina's body. The neighbor testified that she saw Christina's family truck in the driveway, but Christina did not come to the door. She entered the house and found Christina lying in bed, unresponsive. The neighbor asked Jason if she should try to wake her up. He replied that Christina must have fallen asleep and that he would come home. The neighbor went back inside and removed the covers around Christina because she felt cold and had foam coming from her mouth and nose. The neighbor called 911 and another neighbor who was a registered nurse. The neighbor, who was a registered nurse, testified that Christina was cold, stiff, had no pulse, and had white foam coming from her mouth. She did not attempt to resuscitate Christina because she believed she was already dead. Jason told the police that he asked a neighbor to check on Christina and that he had to rush home because Christina was unresponsive. However, witnesses said Jason did not appear anxious or in a hurry. What raised suspicions about Jason was that morning he called Christina's supervisor at work. He told her that Christina had died the night before and that he wanted to inquire about the $100,000 death benefit from Christina's life insurance policy through work. Additionally, one of the women, Jason, had an intimate relationship with told investigators that Jason had contacted her on the day of Christina's death and said that his wife had died from an overdose of a controlled substance. This suggests that he knew what caused Christina's death even before the medical examiner's report. That evening, the neighbor he had asked to check on Christina saw him in his driveway. She said that Jason told her that Christina was not the angel her parents thought she was, and that their child would soon learn all the good and bad things about Christina. He said that Christina dropped her bowl of cereal, and he told her to go to bed. Jason also told a neighbor that his wife tossed and turned during the night, and that he heard her coughing before he left for work. Jason wondered if that was her last breath. Jason told a police officer that Christina was coughing a lot when he left the house. He also told the police that Christina fell asleep eating cereal the night before she died. Finally, Jason told Christina's mother, Kathy, that before she died, Christina complained that her water tasted like chemicals. One of the main motives in this case is believed to be insurance money. Within a week of Christina's death, Jason and his mother went to Christina's workplace to inquire about the life insurance money. Additionally, Jason received a $20,000 death benefit from a life insurance policy issued by his company shortly after Christina's death. One of Jason's lovers moved in with Jason and his children. Christina's mother believed that Jason's lover moved in with him after Christina's funeral. However, Jason's neighbor testified that the lover had even moved into Jason's home before Christina's funeral. The neighbor added that Jason's adult children from a previous marriage moved into the home within days of Christina's death. Police also discovered that Jason Harris purchased a plane ticket to Rhode Island 9 days after Christina's death to visit a woman with whom he had exchanged more than 5,800 text messages. County Medical Examiner Dr. Brian Hunter submitted postmortem blood and urine samples for laboratory testing. Dr. Hunter determined that the test results were consistent with Christina being poisoned by a lethal substance. Initially, Dr. Hunter determined that her death was an accident because there were no injection marks on Christina's body, and investigators did not find any powder residue or rolling papers next to the bed where Christina died. In 2016, the Michigan State Police took over the investigation into Christina's death. In 2019, after Christina's family disputed Christina's cause of death, Dr. Hunter later changed Christina's death certificate from an accident to a homicide. Police charged Jason with first-degree murder, solicitation of murder, and delivery of a controlled substance resulting in death. He was denied bail. Jason's attorney, Nicholas Robinson, said his client pleaded not guilty to the charges and wanted to fight them. When he was arrested, Jason had lost his job after testing positive for drugs. Kathy's efforts to ensure that law enforcement would punish the person responsible for her daughter's death were not overlooked. Gena's County Prosecutor David Layton said that a few years ago, he began receiving Facebook messages and emails from a Davidson woman who claimed her daughter had died and that her death was not an accident. "It can't be happening," the woman told the prosecutor. She was certain that someone had caused her daughter's death. Kathy's passionate pleas caught David Layton's attention, prompting authorities to re-examine the death of her daughter, Christina. "I will never forget what she wrote in an email, prosecutor. You are my last hope. This is our last chance to get justice for my daughter. Please help me," David Layton said. "At that moment, and as I spoke to her this morning, I was absolutely convinced that her daughter's death was not an accident. It was the result of foul play. It was Kathy's relentless efforts to seek justice for her daughter's death that led to this situation, and those efforts paid off." The trial began in 2020. The prosecution alleged that Jason put a controlled substance in his wife's cereal bowl to kill her. He then went to work as usual, waited a few hours, and asked a neighbor to check on Christina. According to the prosecution, Jason wanted someone else to discover his wife's body in order to reduce suspicion against him. The direct evidence against Jason was overwhelming. Jason had a motive for killing Christina. He was having an affair with another woman, suspected she was cheating on him, believed the second child was not his, and was tired of her nagging. Jason did not want a divorce because he did not want to pay child support or lose custody of her. Before her death, Jason told a coworker that he wanted Christina dead. On the morning of her death, Jason called her company to inquire about a $100,000 life insurance policy. And in that call, he said Christina had died the night before. The jury heard clear evidence that Jason not only wanted Christina dead, but that he had tried to hire someone to kill her. He planned to do this and knew where to buy illegal drugs. In fact, he had purchased them on multiple occasions to give to Christina. At trial, multiple witnesses testified that Christina did not use drugs recreationally. Christina was very careful about what she consumed because she was breastfeeding. Furthermore, tests showed that her frozen breast milk contained no harmful substances. To support the theory that Jason had poisoned Christina's food, the prosecution presented toxicology reports. For example, Dr. Judge argued that Christina's death could have been caused by ingestion of some kind of poison. The prosecution ruled out injection because no traces of injection or needles were found at the scene. Dr. Judge also testified that inhalation was unlikely because no rolled-up dollar bills or snorting paper were found at the scene. The court gave Jason Harris a chance to speak, but he did not apologize or show remorse. Instead, he insisted that he was innocent. The judge said the jury did not believe your lies. ultimately exposing him as a selfish and deceitful murderer. On November 17, 2021, the jury found Jason Harris, 47, guilty on all charges. 3 weeks later, the court sentenced him to life in prison without parole. He has appealed the verdict, however. After the trial, prosecutor David Layton expressed his condolences to Christina's family and friends, emphasizing that this was a tragic case. Layton went on to say, "While this case has many unique and media-driven details, the most important thing is the family's loss. I hope this verdict helps them find comfort in knowing that justice has been served." Jason requested a new trial on the grounds that his defense attorney did not do a good job. He introduced evidence in the form of his attorney's testimony, showing that his defense attorney failed to seek an independent expert opinion on the prosecution's evidence and failed to consult with an independent toxicologist. Jason's defense attorney explained this decision as part of a trial strategy because he had thoroughly questioned Dr. Hunter and was able to show the jury that Dr. Hunter had changed his opinion about the cause of death based on information from a related civil lawsuit. In February 2024, the Michigan Court of Appeals upheld Jason Harris's conviction. He remains in prison for life without the possibility of parole.